Hello and welcome to Sam Not So Wise. My name is Sam and today I'm going to be giving you my top 10 authors of all time list. This is my second top 10 on the channel, the first one being my first video, which was my top 10 sci-fi and fantasy series of all time. I'll put a link for that in the description. I have some ideas for more top 10s. I know they're super popular, but I don't really want them to be like my normal content. I want to spread them out. So yeah, we'll see. I think the next one will probably be my top 10 sci-fi books, but yeah, maybe let's keep it in another 15 videos or something, I don't know, or when I lose creativity or ideas in videos. But anyway, my top 10 authors. So is it going to be very similar to my top 10 series? Kind of, it's quite similar, but there's a couple of factors to consider. One is that there are a few authors I read who haven't written any series whatsoever, who I would consider my favorite, so they will sneak in. And there are some that wrote multiple series, not just one series. So that was something else to consider when I think of who is my favorite author. But I have been having this kind of inner struggle of, I mean, firstly, it's difficult to choose a top 10 anyway, but also authors who only wrote one series should, you know, do they get a penalty for only writing one series, but then that's like their life work? It's kind of a hard struggle that I don't really know how to think about. Like, should my favorite series, should the author from that series be my favorite author? I don't think so, but I can't really put it into words why. If anyone has any thoughts about that, let me know, and I'll talk a little bit about it throughout the video, I'm sure. But with much further ado, because I am tired and I look haggard because I slept like shit and it's cold, so I'm wearing a jumper for the first time in my videos. So yes, much further ado, let's get into my top 10 authors. Now, everyone knows that a top 10 isn't really a top 10. There are always honourable mentions, those ones that you love and were just outside of the top 10. So I have 4 to talk about in no particular order, who have the potential to break into the top 10 should I read any more of their books. So the first one I'll talk about is Adrian Tchaikovsky, who wrote things such as the Children of Time trilogy and the City of Last Chances, which is in the Tyrant Philosophers trilogy. So these are the books I've read, the Children of Time trilogy and the first of the Tyrant Philosophers, planning to read the next 2 as soon as I can. And that's all I've read from him. But one more that I really enjoy could tip him into the top 10 because I've enjoyed every single one of them to varying amounts, but Children of Time was absolutely amazing. City of Last Chances, absolutely amazing. And this author has a humongous catalogue, which is both dangerous and exciting at the same time, because it's exciting that there's a lot to read, but I worry that the quality won't be the same throughout. But anyway, what I love about him is he's such an imaginative sci-fi and fantasy writer. So he writes in both genres, which is really fun, and he's good at both. He kind of writes thinking man's books. I know that sounds really lofty, but they're not kind of just like your easy palate cleanser books. They're deep and philosophical and not always easy, but always a really fun story as well. So he's got such an imagination, such a wide variety. He's just an exciting author and he's got a lot to read. Next up, I'm going to talk about David Mitchell, the author, not the actor, although I love the actor too. So this is Cloud Atlas, which is my favorite by him. And you know, I read this before it got cool on YouTube. So if you're watching Jimmy Nuts, who kind of started this whole Cloud Atlas revolution, which I know he isn't, but before I read this way before him. I read this twice before him. Anyway, I've read 3 of his books. 1 was average, 2 were just absolutely excellent. And he just writes really kind of experimental stuff. You may see a theme coming up here, like he writes quite different things. This book has got a really interesting structure, which just really grabbed me. But the other book by him that I loved was extremely emotional as well. So he has both sides to him, like the deeper, harder sci-fi experiments, but also just the personal stuff as well. And I love that variety within him. 1 or 2 more of his could push me over. Let me know which one I should read next, because I really like his writing style and, you know, just the cool things he does. Next up, I'm going to mention Alistair Reynolds, who wrote Revelation Space, the series, plus a lot of standalones and other series as well. I've basically read the 4 main books in the Revelation Space universe, plus 1 standalone, and I've loved every single one. I've loved them. They've not like reached the absolute peak, but I think he could sneak into the list by being just consistently really good if I read more books by him, which I really want to do. And I love his ideas. I love the scope of his sci-fi. It's like high space opera, but it's just taken to another level, and he does really interesting and different things. Again, I love the experimentation within the genre. It's not just space battles and lasers, it's thoughtful stuff. And I just need to try more of his stuff. I really want to try some of his standalones because he's got quite a few that I've heard are really good. I talked about him in my space operas and being British video, which I'm so proud of. And I'll put a link to that in the description as well if you want to learn more about Revelation Space. Finally, my honourable mentions, I want to annoy some people by putting Brandon Sanderson outside of my top 10. So I have kind of a weird relationship with Brandon Sanderson. I really enjoy his stories. Mistborn was really good. Stormlight, I'm kind of halfway through, a little bit more Rhythm of War, and that's kind of been up and down. I really didn't like Tress of the Emerald Sea. I'm one of the only ones. I liked Warbreaker. So yeah, it's kind of up and down. I really enjoy his storytelling and the kind of the slower to the avalanche style of writing he does. It makes it really exciting to read, but it's just not the deepest writing either. Like, I have a problem with his dialogue and stuff like that. So yeah, it's kind of a confusing relationship, but I really respect what he does and how much he writes and the epicness of his stories. I love world building, and Brandon Sanderson is excellent at world building. So he deserves to be in the conversation, but he's just not quite peeking into the top 10 yet. So let's finally kick off the top 10 with another potential controversy, which is Neil Gaiman. I'm going to hold up my favorite book by him, which is Neverwhere. The controversy surrounds his potential illegal activities, which are kind of nasty, but we'll not talk about that right now. I find the conversation of separating art and artists very difficult and dependent on the person and what happened, blah, 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 blah. Carry on, Sam. But anyway, I've read almost all of his books. There's only 2 I haven't read, Graveyard Book and Norse Mythology, and every other one I've read, I've really liked. Not so much the short stories, because I kind of don't get short stories. I'm stupid. But he always writes really atmospheric books, and that is largely done through his beautiful writing. He has wonderful prose, but he has such fun stories as well. A lot of whimsy in them, but also a lot of depth. And it's super varied. This is another thing that I talk about a lot. I like people that vary their style. So he's written fairy tales, stories about old gods, children's horror, and many, many more, things, many more settings. So Neil Gaiman is a great one to read if you want some short books that pack a punch and are fun. Author number 9 is Robin Hobb. If you've watched my top 10 series video, then you'll realize that she is quite high up on that and has been pushed down in this list. This is one of those things where I'm like, she's high up in my series, but would I consider her in my top 5 authors? I'd consider her, but there are just others that are ahead, and I don't know why. Can anyone explain that to me? Anyway, she obviously wrote Realm of the Elderlings, which is a 16-book series, so I've read 16 of her books. I know she has a couple of other little sub-series, but I have not read those and kind of not really interested. But she is a beautiful writer. Her prose is stunning. Her character building is probably what she's most famous for. She really takes a character and puts them through the ringer, and they come out a completely different person, sometimes several times. And she has such a slow but mindful way of writing. You don't realize how connected you're getting to these characters until suddenly, bosh, all of the emotions hit you, and I'm there for the emotions. But don't think that the slow writing means that she can't write a plot. If you say that, it means you have not read Live Ship Traders, because my God, the plot in that trilogy is so twisty-turny and it absolutely blew me away. One of my favorite of all time. And I love that each sub-series has its like a different flavor. You know, they're all connected and there are certain things that are explored again, but they all do have a separate, you know, distinction, which I really love. I think what maybe puts her down a bit is that some of her books were on the middling side. Like if every one of these 16 was like a 5-star, then she would be higher up the list for sure. And at number 8, we have Kazuo Ishiguro. And my favorite book by him is Never Let Me Go. And once again, I was reading these before it started becoming cool on the booktube spheres that I watch, at least anyway. You know, the likes of Jimmy Nuts and Murphy Napier and Joanna all reading Ishiguro and thinking they're starting a trend. I read these before you, and I've read this twice before you. Anyway, yes, I've read all but one of his books. I haven't read his first book, but I really want to get to it, and I will. Now, there are a couple of misses in there, a couple that were just meh, but you know, no author's going to be perfect forever. But he gets away with it because even in the books I didn't necessarily enjoy, his style always comes through, and that's what I really like about Ishiguro. He has what I call just the Ishiguro style, because no one else does it quite like him. It's a certain kind of creepiness in his writing where you're reading a story, but there's something subtly going on behind the scenes. Always something, you know, that he knows, and he knows that you know that he knows, but he's gonna tell you in his own time and in his own way, and you feel this through the characters as well. It's not just you, it's through the characters, and it's just such a subtle, nuanced way of bringing an intrigue into his worlds, and I just love it. It's really addictive, and his beautiful writing, his prose is wonderful. And again, he's a very varied writer. He's got some very different concepts. There's a couple of books which are kind of sci-fi, but in like a very low sci-fi way, but big ideas. It's really hard to explain until you read them, but he also writes a lot of beautiful character studies and society studies, kind of, really, and it's just beautiful stuff. It's very engrossing, and I highly recommend you pick up Never Let Me Go at least. Number 7 is Germ, George R.R. Martin, the author obviously of A Song of Ice and Fire, amongst other things. I've only read the 5 main books within this series. I'd love to read the other offshoots within the series and other things he's written, but TBRs, blah, blah, blah. This is very high up in my top 10 series of all time, so that automatically makes him one of my favorite authors. Again, that problem of not really knowing how to distinguish. But he also has a big role in my reading life, because this is kind of the first fantasy series that really got me going into the sci-fi fantasy genre. And also because of my enjoyment of his writing. I think he's an excellent writer. And what I love the most, I think, about him is his risk-taking. This man was not afraid to take something that is, you know, tropey and been done before, and just, you know, just do something completely different, just surprise you. And that's kind of my favorite thing in art. It's the same in music, when people have like a tradition that they take inspiration from and then put something new into it. And that's what George did. You know, his famous deaths and all that kind of stuff. He was a risk taker, and I really respect that in an author. But obviously, his characters, again, everybody knows this, the character development, he has some of the best characters ever written in any fiction ever, and I will fight anybody about that. And the political intrigue, I love political intrigue, and this man knows how to write political intrigue, all the backstabbing and the scheming, and it's so intricate. Like, the world building of this political system in this world is just so intricate, but well understood, and it's just done to absolute perfection. There are some absolutely huge moments in this series. George R.R. Martin knows how to write, or at least he used to. Coming in at number 6 is John Gwynne, the writer of The Faithful and the Fallen, and the following trilogy called Of Blood and Bone, which I still shamefully have not read, but also the Bloodsworn Saga, which concluded the other day with the Fury of the Gods. I am up to the Hunger of the Gods, which I finished the other day, and I'm still waiting for my copy of Fury because Iceland is awful at getting anything into the country. So please come soon, please come soon. And I'm excited to be talking with Philip and a bunch of other amazing people, including the author, hopefully very soon. So excited. But anyway, what I love about John Gwynne is a lot of stuff. And one of the things that I really like is what I talked about with Martin, where you take a trope or a classic setting and then you do other things within them. So John Gwynne is a trope writer, and he's made that known that he loves tropes. But what he does is he takes them and he subtly alters them and does his own thing with them. You expect something, but it's not going to happen that way because he wants to twist your expectations and stab you in the gut whilst doing it. Because the man is an emotional writer. My God, the relationships within these series, both of the series I've read, are just really heartfelt. You can tell this man is an extremely family orientated man, and he loves the people around him, and he puts that in his books, and he will make you feel a lot of love and then a lot of pain when he takes some of these people away from you. And it's a weird thing to be addicted to this pain, but you keep coming back to these characters and you keep getting let down and built up and let down, and it's just an emotional roller coaster. But of course, this man is also famous for his fast-paced writing, and he is the best action writer I've ever read. I'm not really bothered about reading all the stabby stuff usually, but this man makes me interested because he really knows what he's talking about. But there's a balance of the pace in the books as well. You know, he has those fast-paced action, stabby sections, but also the heartfelt moments and the building up of the characters and the lore. And again, the lore, his worlds are brilliant and big and epic and just so this man has everything. And I'm really excited to see where he goes and to read the next book within this series. So now we're into the top 5. Finally, I need to speed up. I'm so sorry. We have Terry Pratchett, who I've spoken about on this channel a bit already. Again, he was very high up in my series video. So I've read almost all of the Discworld, just one book I haven't read. And I say it's one series, but really it's several. And I think that is one thing that also pushes him up this list very high, is because even though it's one series, there are a lot of sub-series within the Discworld as a whole, and that allows him to explore different ideas and different characters, so it feels a lot more varied than if it was just a 40-book series of very linear stuff. So again, that variety is something that really interests me, and he explores it masterfully. Obviously, he's known for his humor. I absolutely love his humor. It's not for everyone, but people who do love this humor will just fall in love with him immediately. Me being British, it's easy to. But he also has extremely thoughtful thematic work. It's not just laughs, but these are often working in tandem. He will point some kind of stupid thing that humans do and make a comment about it, and then make you laugh about it at the same time. It's like, silly humans, we're horrible. And it's just a wonderful combination. But he had an amazingly imaginative world. His imagination was very sharp, and also really, really fun stories. So he has it all, really. Terry Pratchett is an excellent writer and a great palate cleanser writer. The number 4 spot goes to the king himself, Stephen King. I have read 14 of his books so far, and there are so many more I want to read, 7 of them being in the Dark Tower series, which was one of my favorite series of all time. He is probably I think he's the only author who is higher in the list of authors than the series is, because he's obviously written so many books, and only not even 10% of his books were part of this series. So I loved Dark Tower, and I loved everything else I've read by him. All of the other 7 books, none of them have been below a 4-star. I know there are many books that probably will be, but I'm choosing quite well in what I want to read. And I just love the man and his writing. Everything I've read has been great. know, the Dark Tower itself is one of my favorites. Just the imagination of it, the craziness, the experimentation, how fun, but also how thoughtful it is, and the character writing. He is an amazing character writer. And I think what I love about his character writing as well is, for the most part, they are just like everyday normal people. And that makes you really connect to them in some way. There's always somebody in one of his stories that you'll connect to the most, because he just writes normal people really well. He's not bothered about doing anything grand and super to do with his characters. He just wants to explore what normal people and normal societies are like, and it's just really nice to read that. And I love how his prose is really appropriate to those people. So he can have moments of absolute beauty and speculation within his prose, but then he also has the dialogue, which is extremely fitting to the characters, and his range of dialogue is just absolutely superb. He's never stuck for ideas, obviously, because he's got so many books, and he just has a wonderful imagination, and he can tell a story. So yeah, Stephen King is brilliant. He's super famous for a reason. So yes, Stephen King, I love him. Number 3 is Robert Jordan. To absolutely nobody's surprise, if you've watched this channel at all, really. So yes, Wheel of Time, spoiler alert for my top 10 series video, is my favorite series of all time. So obviously that is going to push Robert Jordan very high up my list, because he wrote one of my favorite things ever. And he has had such a big impact on my life as a reader. But I obviously think he's a good author because he wrote my favorite books. And I think world building is one of the things that is my favorite. The world of Randland, weird that it doesn't have a name, is just so well realized. I think it competes with Lord of the Rings, genuinely. I really do think that. Obviously a lot of people would disagree, but this world is extremely well lived in and very well realized. He has amazing character development throughout the 14 books. They change so much and in interesting and rich ways. His plots are interesting and twisting, mostly. Obviously we've heard of the Slug, which is real, but otherwise his plots are fantastically interesting. And again, political maneuvering. I really feel like George R.R. Martin got some inspiration from his political maneuvering. The slog and repetitive writing are a minus, so maybe he would be pushed up further the list if the slog didn't exist and some of the kind of annoying traits he has. But basically, essentially, I think he's such an important writer in the fantasy world, as writing this quintessential bridge series between classic and modern fantasy. And he was an excellent writer. He wrote great stories and a great world, great characters. Obviously, he's a great writer. Number 3. So we've come to number 2, and this is obviously where it started to get extremely difficult to decide between 1 and 2, just like everybody says, and it's real. And that's George Orwell for me. So he wrote my favorite ever book, which is 1984. I've read everything he's written. My second favorite would probably be Burmese Days, which I talked about in my underrated books video series. Link in the description, obviously, always be plugging. And for a long time, George Orwell was my favorite author. But upon making this video, I realized that someone else takes the top spot, and it's very close, but yes. George Orwell has been one of my favorites for a long time. I've read everything he's written, including all of his essays and stuff. There's only one book I don't like, which is called The Road to Wigan Pier, because it's basically just a book of statistics of how poor people are, which can be interesting, but I wanted a little more at the time. I'd probably enjoy it more now. But he's also a really varied author, and I don't think a lot of people realize that. He obviously writes his dystopian stuff, this and 1984 as an example. He wrote quite a few non-fiction books, a lot of them based upon true stories of his life, so his time spent being homeless and his time in the Spanish Civil War. He wrote historical fiction like Burmese Days, which is about the British occupation of Southern Asia. What else is there? He just like writes stories about the struggles of every man, everyday men. So like the Keep the Aspidistra Flying is about the plights of a poor author. There are stories about a clergyman's daughter. There are stories about people going through midlife crises. He just has such a wide variety, and I love that. And in every one of them, they're all super depressing, which I also kind of like. I quite like depressing books. So if you like depressing books, Orwell is for you. But it's always a deep thinking depressing. He's always looking at kind of what's going wrong in the world, and it's always very theme driven, and I like that about it. And it's also very left leaning, which I am. So yeah, this man has had such a huge influence on my reading, and I reread his books quite often, and they always hit again and again and again. This man knows how to talk about the problems that real people go through, and about big events, but in a subtle way, in a way that you might not have thought of before. So George Orwell is somebody who needs to continue to be talked about because he is one of the best. So we've come to my number one, my favorite author of all time. And people who have watched almost all of my videos, I'm looking at you, Shannon and Gav, you know who my favorite author of all time is. It's Ian Banks, or Ian M. Banks. Ian M. Banks for when he wrote sci-fi, and Ian Banks for when he wrote contemporary fiction. It's the same dude, but everybody who's watched this channel at all will know that The Culture is my favorite series of all time. I've spoke about it a lot on the channel, so I'll try and keep this brief. This is just my favorite sci-fi. It's extremely unique in its conception as being a utopian society, and it's sci-fi with a capital Sci. And what I love about this series as well is it's 10 books, but they're all standalone. So the variety and the imagination, again, that's something I love, is huge and far-flung, because every book is very different, but they're always fully thematically driven. But they have extremely fun and interesting plots as well, with a dash of humor. Very thoughtful. So yes, more people need to talk about The Culture. Please read The Culture. But also his contemporary fiction, I've read 5 of them. The most recent one being Wit, which is about a religious cult. So again, his imagination is quite interesting, and I think that's what I love about him. He always is kind of like quite out there in what he's writing about. Only one of them I've read I thought was average, not very good, but all of the other 4 were just really brilliant. And these tend to be a lot more character focused compared to his sci-fi, which is kind of normal. And his characters are always really fun, very interesting personalities. A lot of the everyman characters, again, which I tend to like a lot of. A lot of relationship type building work in there. And yeah, they're just always very interesting thought experiments, which I love. His contemporary work is also a little bit more emotional. He has dragged some tears out of me. So this man, just Ian Banks is the best, okay? More people need to read him. I don't see anybody talking about him on YouTube. The variety of him is probably my favorite thing, but he has wonderful prose, he has wonderful imagination, he is thoughtful. I'm tired, this has been a long video. Ian Banks is the best author. Oh, this has been too long, I'm sorry, my voice hurts. So that's the end of my top 10 authors. Obviously this kind of list is fairly fluid, and I hope it continues to be fluid because I want it to change. I want new authors to come in and, kick other ones out or move higher up the list as I read more great books. But let me know what your top 10 is. Let me know what you think of my top 10. Let me know if you have any thoughts about whether your favorite series author should be your favorite author, and that kind of weird struggle that I'm having in my brain that I can't even put into words. But that's it for now. Thank you for watching if you've made it this far, all 5 of you. Please like and subscribe and join me for more videos later. And thank you so much again for watching. I'll see you soon. Goodbye.